Welcome back to Elevated Outdoors. I'm your host, Quentin. We just enjoyed a summary of Genesis that we just finished up. We enjoyed that summary given to us by my brother, Brandon. I know this is not his first time reading through much of this. I want to thank him for doing these videos for us to help us to understand a little bit better. And I know that listening to somebody read, especially somebody who sometimes stumbles through words and whatnot, is hard to do. It's easy to lose your attention, but like I said when I started this channel, this is as much for me as it is for those of you who choose to tune in and listen. So we just finished up Genesis, and the next book of the Bible is Exodus, as Brandon had mentioned in yesterday's video. Exodus, the introduction that my Learning Bible here tells us is the reason why to read this book, because it's a spectacular escape of the hair-raising chase scene are only two of the many stories in this book of Exodus. But this book is much more than an epic adventure. It recounts God's supernatural rescue of the Israelites from Egypt. Despite God's miraculous intervention, the Israelites seem unable to remain loyal to Him. But Israel's faltering faith reminds us that even imperfect people can get to know the God who loves them perfectly. And isn't that a great thing? None of us are perfect. As much as we may try, or as much as we try, we may try to pretend to be perfect. It's simply not the case, right? We all have our faults, each and every one of us. And to have a God that still loves you perfectly and doesn't hold them against you is an amazing thing. Who wrote this book? Again, Moses, same as Genesis, he wrote the book of Exodus as well. I think we'll see a lot moving forward that Moses was one of the great storytellers of the Bible. And again, I won't necessarily say stories, because these aren't fictional stories. They are historical accounts of things that have happened. Why was it written? Exodus was written to remind the Israelites how God had rescued them from oppression. The book also lays out a foundational theology in which God reveals His name, His attributes, His redemption, His law, and how He is to be worshipped. When was it written? Approximately 1440 BC. What is the historical setting for this book? Jacob and his family had migrated to Egypt, as we learned in Genesis, to escape the famine in Canaan about 4 centuries earlier. But the land of escape became a land of bondage, as the Egyptians sought to maintain their dominance over the increasing numbers of Israelites by forcing them into slave labor. Shortly before his death in Egypt, Moses wrote down the swirling events of Israel's escape from Egypt. What to look out for in Exodus. Brandon touched on this just a little bit at the end of his video. Exodus spotlights God's direct involvement in human history and reveals how he goes to astonishing lengths to reach those he loves. For example, God enables Moses to become a great prophet in Israel, despite Moses' own fears and insecurities. Repeatedly, Exodus shows that even though people fail, God continues blessing those who trust him as their only hope. What I really liked from that is God enabled Moses to become a great prophet in Israel, despite Moses' own fears and insecurities. If that's not a eye-opening truth, right? By no means am I a prophet, but starting this page, I was full of insecurities and doubts, and I, like Moses, if I had not had overcame them and succumbed to fear of what if, someone, even if one other person hadn't, may not have found this content to read through the Bible, or even if they don't follow us all the way through and they catch a video here or there, learn more about the Bible and their faith than they may have known beforehand. So I find that really cool, that how he works through Moses even through his doubts and insecurities. So let's get at it. Exodus chapter 1, the Israelites oppressed. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and his brothers and all that generation died, but the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and become exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. So remember, they said this happened, 4 centuries later. So what did it say? It said it. See, this is where sometimes I struggle to retain things I just read. Okay, so yeah, Jacob and his family had migrated to Egypt to escape the famine in Canaan about 4 centuries earlier. So over the course of them 4 centuries, Jacob and Joseph and his brothers have all passed away, but the descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all, and over them 4 centuries, they multiplied greatly. If you recall, some of these people, some of these families are having upwards of 12 or more children. So the Israelites are starting to equal or exceed that of the Egyptians in the area. Then a new king who did not know about Joseph came into Egypt. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if a war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country." So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor in brick and mortar, and with all the kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, "When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live." The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, "Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live." So this, I've heard of this happening in I believe it's China, where I don't know if it's still the case, but they would limit the amount of boys to girls who were born. So this says how many years have passed since Joseph died. The first 7 verses of Exodus cover about 400 years. Joseph's feats had long been erased from the Egyptians' minds. That's why it says that the new king did not know about Joseph when he came into power. How could the Egyptians enslave so many people? They had developed government with the military, legal and political personnel, to institute whatever decrees they chose, including the employment of slave labor. You may ask why the Israelites didn't revolt if there were so many of them and not necessarily so few of the Egyptians, but they're multiplying at an alarming rate. So why didn't they revolt? This says, "We do not know for sure, though perhaps they simply did not have the numbers, leadership, willpower, or weapons to organize to overthrow their captors." Remember, we just learned that the Egyptians had a fully developed government and military, so the Israelites may have known that they wouldn't have stood a chance and didn't have much of a choice but to do slave labor. This question here asks, were midwives right to disobey the king? While disobeying authorities is generally wrong, the command of this particular king was evil. God's law supersedes such commands. At times, we may find it necessary to oppose rulers and governments if their laws contradict what the Lord says. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and break laws. That's not my place to do that. But we make choices based on our morals and our beliefs, right? And our ethics that we're brought up on. And if there's a gray area there and you were to do something that the governing bodies may not, your ideas and ideas may not align, laws and whatnot were not necessarily the Bible was not necessarily considered when those were written, right? Here's a great question. Something that a lot of us may ask ourselves, and that is lying ever okay? Some believe the midwives may not have lied because they told Pharaoh part of the truth. Others believe they did lie, but were justified on the grounds that murder is a worse crime than lying. Still, others think these women should have told the truth, trusting God to take care of the infants and suffering the consequences for disobeying Pharaoh's etiquette. Breaking one of God's laws to avoid breaking another is a complex ethical dilemma. Chapter 2, Exodus chapter 2, speaks of the birth of Moses. Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, he hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. When she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile, his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. Is this one of the Hebrew babies? She asked. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes. Go," she answered. And the woman went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." So, before I even read any of the insight given to this, what I gather from that is Pharaoh's daughter herself, whose father is the one that said to let every girl live, but to have every baby boy who was born to be drowned in the Nile. But when she was to come across a child who was clearly a boy, who was being hidden in the reeds to avoid being killed in the Nile, she was full of compassion, and she asked for the child's mother to nurse the child, and when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Now I'm going to read some of these insights in the Bible here, and it says, "Was Moses' mother giving the baby up to die?" So in a sense, she obeyed the king by putting the baby in the Nile River. This is kind of touching on, she didn't necessarily lie, did she? She did what she was asked to do, although it may have been a little bit unorthodox. She put him in a protective basket, however, with the hope that he would be found and saved. It evidently was no secret where Pharaoh's daughter went to bathe. So I'm sure they, mind you, they didn't have indoor plumbing, back then. And I'm sure the royalty went to the finest areas of the river to bathe, and it was probably public knowledge. So this says that his mom put him in a protective basket with the hope that he would be found and saved. And that may be the case. Who am I to question the Bible, right? That may have been the case, and it may have just been to hide him so he didn't become drowned in the Nile and still lived. As remember, his sister was within eyesight and kind of watched over him. Who was Pharaoh's daughter? This asks. Many think this woman was Hatshepsut's wife of Thutmose. Hatshepsut was later named queen and ruled with her brothers Thutmose III. Others think that this woman was the daughter of Ramses II, a pharaoh who was especially cruel to the Hebrew slaves. So there's not a set in stone who Pharaoh's daughter was, except for the fact that she was the daughter of the person who put all infant boys essentially to death, although she did not let that happen. It says, did the princess defy Pharaoh's etiquette? It's unclear why Pharaoh's daughter got away with saving a male Hebrew baby during the time her father had ordered them killed. Some think slave adoption was common practice for Egyptian nobility. Pharaoh's daughter may have rationalized that she would be raising Moses as an Egyptian, not a Hebrew. Additionally, her royal status may have put her above the laws others had to follow. Chapter 2 goes on with more about Moses, and it says, Moses flees to Midian. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Glancing this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, What I did must have become known. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Ruel's, I think Ruel's the pronunciation there. Their father returned to Ruel, their father. He asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" And they answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "And where is he?" he asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to stay with the man, who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I've become an alien in a foreign land." During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. This question here is pertaining to chapter 2, verse 12, which refers to Moses killing the Egyptian that he saw fighting with a Hebrew, or beating a Hebrew. Was Moses' action justifiable? No, not even Moses, who became the giver of the law, was justified in murdering one of his captors. The phrase glancing this way and that, and the fact that he hid the corpse in the sand, suggests that Moses knew killing the Egyptian was wrong. So, to put a geographical location, if you're at all familiar with, or you could look at a map, Moses was in Egypt, which is near Nile, near the Nile River, which is still present today, close to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. And where he fled to is Midian, which is to the I believe, to the east. And it's to the far side of the Red Sea, which again is still, I believe, can be found on geographical maps today. At the top of the Red Sea, there's two, I guess there's a peninsula that, on that peninsula is where Mount Sinai is at, which we'll read about later in the Bible. We're going to go on to read chapter 3, Moses in the burning bush. I recall hearing of this. Most of what I heard about Moses in church growing up was, of course, I heard of the birth of Moses and him being hidden in a basket within the reeds next to the Nile. I'm sure I heard about Pharaoh's daughter taking him, but it's not something that today I can honestly say that I recalled until I reread it. This next part, I remember hearing of the burning bush, but I don't remember that story hardly at all. And then, of course, later on, Moses parting the Red Sea, which I'm not sure. I don't believe that's in Exodus, but you'll find out. You'll find that out with me. Chapter 3, Moses in the burning bush. Now Moses was tending to the flock of Jethro. I don't think he was a Clampett, but his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that through the bush, though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Remember, they're in desert climate, and I would assume all of the foliage and underbrush and stuff like that would be pretty easy to burn. But so seeing a bush on fire, and although on fire it doesn't appear to be burned, would be a sight to see. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham. He had many sons. The God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land into the good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. This is the first account we hear of God being referred to as I am. And not referred to as he's calling himself I am, which is where we get the title, the Great I Am. This is what you're to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. Go assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and seen what has been done to you in Egypt, and I have promised to bring you out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor, and any woman living in her house, for articles of silver and gold, and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. So Moses was asked to take his sandals off because he was standing on holy ground, right? It says, why are bare feet considered more holy? Taking off sandals was a cultural and religious symbol of reverence and respect. In Joshua chapter 5, verse 15, we're going to see more of what bare feet meant to Jesus, but that may also be, remember, it's a symbol of reverence and respect. That may be the foundation of why when we enter somebody's home, out of respect for them, we take off our shoes. And that may be reaching a little bit. Maybe it doesn't have any biblical reasoning behind it at all, but definitely something that could go hand in hand there. How would a trip back to the mountain be a sign? Returning to the mountain, as God mentioned in chapter 3, verse 12, Returning to the mountain would demonstrate to Moses that he could trust God to keep his promise and bring the Israelites to the promised land. So, there's so far in the book of Exodus, we've met Moses, and he seems like he's going to be a main character of Exodus, much as Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph were of Genesis, right? We learned how he was born and the conflict and suspense that was around that. We've also learned that he became the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and how he stood up for his Hebrew basically family, biological family, so to speak, even though he was being raised as an Egyptian. And then how he fled, and while fleeing, he came across the burning bush, where angel of God tells him that he is to go back to Egypt and lead the Hebrews and Israelites to the land of milk and honey. So that it goes to show how everything happens for a reason, right? It may not be in our control. It certainly wasn't in Moses' control when his mom, as an infant, chose to not abide by the Pharaoh's rulings and tried to hide him to spare him from being killed. And it wasn't Moses' choice to be sorry about that. It wasn't Moses' choice to be raised as Egyptian, but he made the conscious decision to stand up for right and wrong, and may have done some wrong on his own. We've all made decisions we may not be proud of, and maybe those that we've even ran from, literally or metaphorically speaking. But he stood up for the Hebrews, and all the while he was being watched by God, as God can see all and knows all, and he was being watched over and kept safe. And when the time was right, he was called upon by God to be a pivotal part of the book of Exodus and the history, and lead the Israelites out of slavery, because it's so important to this part of the story. We're going to read chapter 4. And those are the signs for Moses. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground and said, Moses threw on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took a hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hands. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe in the Lord and God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand inside it, into his cloak. And when he took it out, it was leprous, like snow. "Now put it back into your cloak," he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak. When he took it out, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, "If they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, then take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground." Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, I have never been eloquent." It's a word I don't know if I've ever seen wrote out. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. I feel you. And everyone who listens to me read probably agrees. Thanks for not judging. Or, if you watch the videos just to judge, thanks for the likes. Thanks for the views. The Lord said to him, "Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? And who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." Hey, that there? If you want to help me to speak and teach me what to say, that'd be cool. They'll all appreciate it too. But Moses said, so I have squirrel moments. You guys have probably seen them. I don't know if you can hear it. Here comes that train. Happens regularly. I have squirrel moments, and I'm out here outside, and we've all heard that phrase, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? The squirrel moments for me today have been hearing branches break or things like that. I'm around, so I hear them, right? But if I wasn't, would they make a sound? I'll let this train go by. Also, you may notice that I'm over here. I am outside. We have a lot of water around us, and that means lots of mosquitoes, lots of bugs. I enjoy nature. It's beautiful. It's great. I love all God's creatures. They all have a purpose, especially in the evenings when it's starting to get dark, and I think it's to feed on me. But anyways, but Moses said, "O Lord, please send someone else to do it." A lot of people, each and every one of you, are capable of spreading the word of God. You're capable of doing what's right, whether it's leading people out of slavery or standing up for people in bad situations and helping where you can. Moses was operating out of fear and insecurities there. Where just before we've learned that he, in the introduction, that he works through them. So let's read on. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak, and I will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand, so you can perform miraculous signs with it." So, similar to what happened there is, through fear and insecurities, he asked, "Oh Lord, please send someone else to do it." God's response to that was, "Well, I'll send your brother, who is much better with words. You guys have met my brother. He's way better with words." So that little couple chapters or couple verses there really hits home, because one of the only people, aside from my wife, who I talked to before I started this was, I talked to God in prayer. I talked to my wife, as I suggest anybody who's married does, talks to their wives about putting themselves out there on social media and for the whole world to see. And I knew this would be a commitment that would impact her. And I talked to my brother because he is the strongest the strongest and most influential person I have in my life when it comes to a lot of things, but especially faith and being a man of God. So I feel like in that moment, God kind of said to me, and I said to my brother, after the first video, before it was even posted, and I announced, "Hey, this is Quentin, and I'm your hiking disciple." So when I said that, none of this has been scripted. If it was to be scripted, it'd probably come across a lot more thought out, right? But I told my brother, "Hey, I'm getting ready to post the first video, and the way I structured it, maybe you could make some videos too." He hikes far more than I do. He may not call himself a hiking disciple. I know that's kind of a silly name that a silly title I've come up with, but he hikes far more than I do. Kind of has a goal to hike in, as many states as he can, and he's done 4 or 5 yet just this summer, which is impressive. But when I told him that, of course, I got the response of nothing but the emoji with the guy with the big eyes, like, "Say what?" But no, I'm glad that he has helped with these. He was a pinnacle part of making the intro video and things of that nature, and has even given me insight on things to talk about and some devotionals to listen to or read before I read the chapters that I share with you guys. And I feel like personally, but I hope that you guys see an improvement from my first video to even this video, and continue to see improvements moving forward. But moving forward, the Lord said, don't go at it alone, take your brother. He'll be the mouth, and you take your staff and so you can perform miraculous signs with it. From there, Moses returns to Egypt in chapter 4, verse 18. Then Moses went back to Jethro. Clamp it, I swear. No, it's not. Sorry, squirrel. Went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, let me go back to my own people in Egypt and see if any of them are still alive. Jethro said, go, and I wish you well. Now the Lord had said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moses took his wife and sons and put them on a donkey and started back to Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you, all the wonders I've given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my son go, so he may worship me. But you refused to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses, and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. At the time she said bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the desert to meet Moses. So he met Moses at the mountain of God and kissed him. Then Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent to him to say, and also about all the miraculous signs that he had commanded him to perform. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had and seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped. So that last chapter kind of lost me. The Lord had just told Moses to go meet with his brother and go back to Pharaoh and rescue the Israelites. But then there was, God wanted God wanted to kill Moses, and Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off his son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it. Why did that happen? Why would God want to kill Moses? This passage is confusing. You don't say. Some think the word Moses should be replaced with Moses' son. Others disagree. Either way, the focus is that Moses' disobedience led to dire consequences. Apparently, Moses has ignored God's command to circumcise one of his children. This is in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10 through 14. Some think his wife Zipporah, Midianite, was especially opposed to the rite. Circumcision, however, was a symbol of obedience and consecration to God's covenant. Before going to Pharaoh, then Moses had some unfinished family business to take care of. So, back in Genesis, when, as Brandon said yesterday, they had an Oprah moment. You get a circumcision, you get a circumcision, everybody gets a circumcision. What a gift, right? Moses' they said that Moses had ignored God's command to circumcise one of his children. Whether that was because his wife thought that she was opposed to the rite, or why, doesn't really matter, I don't believe, but either way, he opposed to follow the rules of, that God had told him. So, God was going to punish him for that because he disobeyed. Which makes a little bit more sense. Why they touch Moses' feet with the bloody foreskin? Many speculate that Zipporah, circumcising her son only to save Moses' life, was repulsed by circumcision. Her actions in that case would have been motivated by anger or revulsion. Another view is that her gesture was an act of repentance for Moses' disobedience. The word bridegroom of blood, the bridegroom, came up, and it was in reference to bridegroom of blood. What is that? When I hear bridegroom, I think a wedding, right? No one knows the precise meaning. There is an interesting wordplay between the bloody rite of circumcision and Zipporah's calling Moses a bridegroom of blood. Most think it's a term of disgust. Here it says in chapter 4, verse 30, and I caught this too and kind of scratched my head about it. It says that Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people. Well, wasn't Moses told that Aaron would do the speaking and Moses was to show the acts of miracles? Here it says it sounds as though Aaron did the miracles that God said Moses would do in verse 17. Yeah, this is not entirely clear. Moses may have done the miracles himself, or he may have done them through Aaron, his representative. The fact that it doesn't state that, they state that it's unclear, and it doesn't definitively say whether he did or did not. Disobey and not show the miracles for himself. I would assume that it doesn't hold a lot of meaning or importance. Moving on, I don't foresee him being punished for that, because as it says, he may or may not have performed them, whether it was by himself or through his representative of his brother Aaron. So that's the first 4 chapters of Exodus. Seems pretty exciting so far. I'll admit, when I started reading the Bible, and it may have just been the way I was understanding things, or maybe it was because I was doing it more out of fear or being uncomfortable, but doing it more for the sake of doing it. But as I grow more comfortable and I'm leaning more into this, I'm learning more, and I hope that you are too. I'm understanding more, and I won't lie, this is 84 pages we've been through. Depends on what version of the Bible and whatnot, but 84 pages, and I can't remember reading 84 pages of anything that didn't have pictures in it since I was required to in high school, you know. And even then, I was the student that would read a little bit and then read the back of the book, and if there was a video or a movie on it, that's what I would do. Not right, I don't condone that, but that's how I learned. Anyway, I hope that you guys are understanding, learning, and enjoying this as much as I'm starting to. And I'm starting to lean into the fact that this is a learning Bible, because especially if this is your first time reading a lot of these stories, we're here to learn. I certainly don't have all the answers. I don't expect you guys to. Who would have any other idea of what a bridegroom would be, other than something about a wedding maybe? They use a lot of unique language. Much of it's outdated, thankfully. There's a lot of terms that, if you have kids, you wish wouldn't be being taught or being used by our youth. But that's what happens over the course of generations. We have slang terms that we used in the... I'm a 90s baby. I'm born late 80s and grew up in the 90s. And through generations, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth, we've all had slang terms that are more accustomed to them eras. But I'm leaning into this being a learning Bible, and it may break up the chapters a little bit, it may be a little bit of a squirrel moment for me, but I also hope it helps for us to grow and for us to learn together, and it answers a lot of questions that I know I'm asking myself on things that I may not understand. So with that, the longest video we've done so far. I'm glad we are well on our way into Exodus, and look forward to getting into more of it. I hope that you all make a point to get outside, whether it's a walk on your lunch break at work or outside doing chores in the evening. If you can squeeze in a hike, that'd be great. Feel free to share pictures in the comments if you're able to. I'm not quite sure. I've honestly haven't commented on a lot of YouTube videos myself. I'm not sure if that's an option given or not, but feel free to let us know how you got outside. Comment sections are open, and other than my loving and supportive wife, I haven't seen many of you in there. So let's make a change there. Feel free to like, subscribe, share. Let's grow this page, not for my own benefit, but for building the kingdom of God and having more brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm a firm believer that the state of the world, and I think you guys can look around and see it, this channel will not get into politics, but the state of the world, no matter where you're at, you look around and things aren't where we'd like it. I feel like we all can benefit from having more Jesus in our lives, right? So with that being said, get outside and stay elevated. Talk to you next time.